This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
Good evening, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening. You are listening to Left From Nowhere on Otago Access Radio 105.4 FM 1575 AM, and I am your host, as ever, Tyler West, a member of the Otago Socialist Society, which just so happens to be the sponsor of this show. In a minute or two, we'll be introducing our guest, Victor Billot, for a discussion on the resurgence of the Alliance Party, a little bit about Victor's history with the Alliance, and a recent campaign that the Alliance has run, the first candidate they've run in anything in about a decade, and just a little chat about why now, why the Alliance, and where could the party potentially go from here now that it has been semi-officially relaunched. Victor is the party president of the Alliance, and also has been a member going back quite some years now, something of an Alliance veteran, if he doesn't mind me saying, and also is a member of the Otago Socialist Society, as well as having been involved in various campaigns over the years, and also being the editor of the Maritime Unions magazine. So quite a few hats that Victor wears, but we're only going to be talking about one of them for the most part today. So, without further ado, I want to welcome Victor on, and how are you doing?
Oh, good, thank you. Yes, quite a few things on at the moment, though, as you've alluded to.
Yes. So I thought we'd get started a little bit with your history with the Alliance. You wrote a pair of articles for the Federation, the New Zealand Federation of Socialist Societies journal Commonweal, a couple of issues back, which detailed a bit of a tragic history of the rise and fall of the Alliance. So I'll direct people who are interested in a kind of upfront and personal history of that tale to have a look at that. Check out the Commonweal on Substack. I believe both parts are available there. But I thought we'd talk a little bit about your own history up front, rather than a broad history of the party itself.
Sure. Well, yes, it's true. I've been there since the beginning in one way or another. I was a founding member of what was called the New Labour Party in 1989. That was founded in May 1989. It was basically during the 80s when the then Labour government had moved very much to the right wing economically. There was basically a split, and Jim Anderton, a Labour Party MP, led that split, and he was the leader of the New Labour Party, which I became a member of at high school at age 17, which is a very long time ago now. Following that, just to a lot of people probably don't know the ins and outs of the history, but the New Labour Party became part of what was then called the Alliance in the early 1990s, and that was it was an alliance. It was a grouping of you could say probably left-wing parties. The New Labour Party and the Greens were probably the two major ones in that mix. There were some other smaller ones. And that was set up really as a way to get around the electoral problem of getting a smaller party or a third party elected, because that was the first past the post electoral system. So that was kind of the logic behind that. But what happened is we got a new electoral system in the 90s called the MMP, and the Alliance carried on as an alliance. The Greens departed without any problems. They just wanted to run their own party, and that was fine, and they left in the late 1990s. And then there was a split in the Alliance in 2001, and that was basically when the Alliance left Parliament. So, ever since then, 20 years, we've been kind of out in the cold a little bit as an electoral party, but we've never really gone away. And I have been a member ever since that time. I've stood for Parliament. I've been party president. I was co-leader, although it all sounds very grand, but it was a nano party, I think you could say. So I don't rate myself that highly because of that. It was just there was a very small party. We were outside Parliament, but we were, I believe, keeping the flame going for a certain type of politics, a kind of left-wing, social democratic socialist, different words for it, but definitely left of what's on offer at the moment in New Zealand. Now, I thought it was probably curtains, and my articles that I wrote for the Commonweal in the last couple of years were kind of almost a bit of an obituary for the Alliance. But lo and behold, as Mark Twain said, rumours of my death are highly exaggerated, and the Alliance seems to have made a comeback in a small way. What's happened is that a new group of people have come forward, younger people, I think it's fair to say, and they have expressed an interest in the Alliance as getting the Alliance going again and fulfilling that role in New Zealand politics. So that brings us to today. The Alliance is back in the game in a small way, and happy to tell you more about that.
Yeah. So I guess something that will probably be of most interest to listeners is this candidate that has been run recently, Tom Roud, in Christchurch for the local elections, who did not get a position, but ran for a community board seat as well as a Christchurch City Council seat in the Central Ward. So how about we talk a little bit about how that run came to be and the campaign itself?
Sure. Well, the Alliance had run a candidate in elections for many years. And we had Tom Roud in Christchurch, and Tom wanted to have a crack at City Council. This just passed local body elections as well as a community board. And he felt that the Alliance was the vehicle for that. He was interested in seeing the Alliance get going again. He thought this was a good opportunity to put it out there to let people know that we're back around, as well, of course, as trying to get elected to the council. So Tom ran a very good campaign. There's no doubt about it. He was in a seat where there was a lot of, I guess you could say, high-profile, quite accomplished candidates. In some wards in Christchurch and around the country, you didn't have any competition because there was such a low interest in local body politics. But in Christchurch Central there was Jake McClellan, the sitting People's Choice person. There was Rafe Manji, who's a former leader of the Opportunities Party, and there were a couple of high-profile independent people as well. So Tom was in with quite a tough field there. He didn't get across the line in the end, but we felt he ran a good campaign and the results were credible. They weren't enough to get elected, but they weren't a disaster. They were just, and we felt that part of the reason with this is that, of course, unlike the People's Choice and some other, we were running just one candidate in these local body elections in New Zealand. So it was a bit of an experiment, and we think it was a successful experiment as far as it goes. Obviously, it would have been great if he'd got on the council or the community board, but we still think the result and the process was good enough for us to carry on. So that was basically the first time the Alliance had run a candidate in a long time, and certainly as I've kind of stepped up as party president in the meantime while we get things, the party functioning again in a proper way, and I was very happy with that candidacy. It was a very well run. The whole ward was leafleted. We had signs everywhere. We got an article in the Spin-Off. I guess that counts for something. And it was just a good. I think we're capable of running local body elections definitely, and also looking at general elections.
Yeah. So there's probably going to be a few people who are listening to this, especially people who are a bit older and remember the Alliance as a major party, remember the Alliance in its kind of its out in the wilderness years. who are going to say, well, why the alliance rather than establishing a new party? As you've mentioned before, and as I understood it coming into this was partially Tom and his team's idea. They're interested in the alliance as a vehicle for kind of democratic socialist politics. And at the very least, in terms of putting a campaign on, I understand there were some 20-odd thousand leaflets distributed, quite professional looking, interviews, etc., all the things you need to do for a good campaign, and quite possibly hobbled quite simply by this being a bit of an experiment, and the first kind of hat tossed in the ring in a long time. So what in particular do you think the alliance as a now kind of a new party again has to offer that perhaps establishing a new organisation doesn't quite?
Well, yeah, I think the thing is effectively the alliance we have now is it has some of the people who've been with it since the beginning, like me. So it is a legitimate kind of inheritor to that tradition. But the reality is a lot of the people coming on board now are new people. I think there's a range of attitudes towards the alliance. I think that the average voter probably maybe remembers the name. They might go, oh, wasn't that Jim Anderton or something? Then you have people who maybe have been involved more in politics. Now, the older people who are involved in politics, the reality was the 80s and 90s and going forward, it was a harsh time. Lots of people had really bad experiences with all sorts of what was going on, the politics. The alliance had a very bad kind of disintegration point when it was in Parliament, and a lot of the people just got wandered off and just got disillusioned. But none of them have come up with anything better. They've either gone off to join the Labour Party. Well, if they want to do that, it's fine. But you're not going to change society. You're just going to be a member of a status quo organisation. So that's what some people have done. Other people have joined the Greens. That's a choice too. Other people have just done nothing or have kind of been involved in things like the Internet Party or the Mana, which have been, in my view, disasters as well. So it's not like there's a lot of amazing options out there. So maybe older people kind of like, some of them, we've had some people come in who were around at the time and they remember what the Alliance stood for. And at one point the Alliance was very popular. We had, around in the 1993 election, we got about 20% of the vote. Number three, really creating a really strong alternative then. But, of course, as I said, there's a whole bunch of new people coming along. Basically every voter under 40, if they've heard of the Alliance, they're a bit more informed, they'll be going, oh, wasn't that? Yeah. They don't really know what it is. And a lot of people have no idea what it is. They don't even know it exists. What is it, And you must remember that, look at the local body elections. Only a few people voted, a minority of people voted. And if you took it under the under 30s, I don't know what the actual figure is, but it's going to be pretty grim. It's probably going to be down there on the 20% mark, So I think that a lot of people don't really know what the Alliance is. What is the Alliance? Okay, the Alliance is a party that stands for what we're just describing as democratic socialist or social democratic politics. I see it as the direct inheritor of the tradition that goes all the way back to the formation 100 years ago of the Socialist Party in New Zealand, the Labour Party. I believe we represent the original Labour principles and policies in a modern context far better than the existing Labour Party does, which is a bold claim, but nonetheless it's true. And I'd challenge them to take that debate on if they want to. They don't want to because they know it's true. At this stage, we're probably just a small kind of like pain in the neck for them. They'd probably like us to go away. But I've always had big plans for the Alliance, and I think that it is in a position now when if you look around the world, people are really supporting what we stand for, things around like basically improving the lot and improving the lives of the working class majority. And that seems a strange thing to say because no other party's saying it. Everyone's got something that's about the economy or something. Where will we stand for improving the lives and the lot of working class people, the majority of people in our society, whether that's with housing, their incomes, healthcare, all those things, job security. So these days that's actually quite a radical message. It wasn't once, but it is now. And if you look around the world, we've got in New York City a really interesting candidate there, Zoran Mamdani, who is really shaking things up there. Very much on the same, probably the similar wavelength in an American context to where we are. In the UK, we've got Your Party, interesting name, but they were basically it's a new left-wing party there. And in Australia, we've got things like the Victorian Socialists, probably a bit more to the left of where the alliance is, but nonetheless, I guess filling that space. So I think a lot of younger people especially are looking for something different, and the idea of socialism is back on the agenda big time, and that's something I'm a little bit surprised by and very happy about.
And it's something that's I think you're right to point out that it's a global trend over the last decade or so. I would, if I were to point out some non-Anglosphere examples, in France we see Mélenchon's France Insoumise. There's been a very shock, I think a lot of people were very surprised by this, resurgence in Die Linke in Germany, which has a very strong socialist tradition and is probably a bit similar to the Alliance, and there are a lot of different forces that comprise that party. The name slips me, but there is a kind of a youth left-wing party in Japan that has done reasonably well at least kind of getting a toehold in the notoriously difficult to crack Japanese diet. So there is a mood around. It's not just something that's in the English-speaking world. It's in a lot of countries around the world. I think you would see, it's a little bit hackneyed to say, oh, well, now's the time that people are really starting to look to this kind of politics in New Zealand. I think you were right to mention Internet and Mana earlier, which kind of captured a bit of that energy around the great financial crisis. But I think it is right to say that that energy does exist. And there hasn't really been much of a force in New Zealand politics that has been able to channel it. There are forces that have tried with varying degrees of success. We could point to, say, in 2014, the Green Party had a fantastic result in that year. A pretty good result in the last election as well. But there is something about that kind of legacy, that keeping the red flag flying legacy of the Socialist Party of New Zealand, and slightly after that, the very early Labour Party of New Zealand, that I would agree it is something that is not really represented when you look at your ballot sheet in New Zealand today, be it at a local or a national election, and there's not really a box to tick if that's your kind of political flavour. I think you are very much correct in that sense. So going forward, the Alliance is looking at putting itself together, cohering into a formal party structure in the coming year or so. I would have no idea if what the future would hold in terms of future electoral runs, but kind of in the near future, that seems to be what's on the agenda, moving towards perhaps a founding Congress or something like that. Conference, not Congress. Perhaps not quite as lofty as calling it a Congress yet, but a conference. So for people who, and we'll come back to this towards the end as well, but for people who are curious about what the Alliance is today, how would they go about finding out?
Well, as you've noted, we're kind of in the refounding stage. It's the Alliance was effectively in hibernation for a long time. We have now effectively relaunched. We've engaged in one local body campaign that we were pretty happy with in terms of how it went in general. And there seems to be a interest and a willingness with the new team that we've built to continue forward, and that is going to mean that we will have to look at all these things. So we haven't really got there isn't a cast iron plan at the moment. We're at the stage of reflecting on the results we've had so far and building and putting together the structures we need to go forward. So unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is pretty dry for a lot of people, but it needs to be done. And those are things like forming a structure in terms of national leadership, branches, to lead the party, to administer the party, local branches so people can get involved in a local level, and of course, coming along with that, we have to do things like create a constitution and update our policies. We do have a set of policies, but they are a little dated now. The principles are very sound. I don't think there's any chance we're going to go off on a radical new direction in terms of our basic policy platforms, but they will have to be updated to the 2025, 2026 context. And of course, part of this is, what is the point of the alliance? Well, obviously, with an electoral party, the goal is to get elected, whether that's modestly at the local level with local bodies, which I think is an important, growingly important part of politics in New Zealand and everywhere, or on the bigger scale, getting representation in Parliament and at some point governing in some form. Now, that's a bigger ask, and there's no pretense at the moment we're even close to doing anything like that. But you have to start somewhere. And if people want to get involved and to influence what we do and to play a part in that, well, they have to get involved. This is a very interesting thing we've got. We've got a lot of online activism these days. We've got a lot of people who are prepared to step up and fight the good fight on Facebook, but we actually need people in non-virtual reality to get involved. And if I've been surprised at the number of people who have been signing up to the Alliance. We've had a steady, I wouldn't say an inrush, but we've had a steady trickle of people signing up, to the Alliance from all around the country, often younger people, which is great. And I think that's a really good sign because we haven't even really been campaigning that hard to build membership. So that's coming up. So at this stage, we are looking at having meetings locally. We are encouraging people to join the Alliance via our website, which is allianceparty.nz online. We've got a Facebook page. That's where we're at the moment. And we will be having a national conference sooner rather than later. And the big question is do we run in the general election under an Alliance Party banner? And that's a really interesting question, which we don't have an answer for yet because we haven't had the debate. And I'm looking forward to that discussion.
So it's a bit of a, it's not quite the ground floor, so to speak, that was in the late 80s. But in terms of this iteration of the Alliance, it's a bit of a get in on the ground floor if you'd like to see an electoral socialist vehicle in this country and you'd like to see yourself in that. And if there are things that you would like such a vehicle to do, then it's a matter of join and put your perspective forward and try and win people to it. I very much agree that I actually think I find with people who are more in my age cohort in their 20s and 30s, there's a tiredness with doing things online, probably because it very much feels like spinning your wheels. There's a little bit you can do. You can use the internet to transmit information, but it doesn't really have any connectivity with the real world unless you make that connectivity happen. So I think I've definitely encountered a lot of people aged between, say, their late teens and their mid-20s who have grown in this kind of digital landscape, often not really by their choice. That's kind of the landscape in which you are young today, who would like to go into the real world, as it were, as a vehicle for political and social activity. And so I'm actually kind of not hugely surprised that the sign-ups have skewed younger, especially if it's people who are not hugely politically active but want to be, and who perhaps have quite a cynical feeling as to the options among the major parties, and they kind of include all the parties with parliamentary representation there. I think the way in which Labour and National are treated as quote-unquote natural major parties is decreasingly true over time, especially with the current tendency for coalitions that actually have quite substantial blocks of quote-unquote minor parties represented in them. Certainly Labour in 2020 was a bit of an aberration to that, but the last couple of the last three terms, two of those have involved very much coalition governments in which the quote-unquote minor parties have had quite a big role to play. So that's a bit of a tangent on my part. But among the larger parties, certainly there's probably a bit of cynicism as to what's possible, and there might be a bit of a feeling that things have stagnated a bit in terms of the horizon that these parties aim toward. So yeah, I'm not entirely surprised that the slow and small but steady stream of membership has skewed younger. I think there's probably some people who are quite excited by the idea of getting in on something on the ground floor.
Yeah, definitely.
So one thing that you did bring up that I think would be good to have a chat about was not only was there low turnout in this most recent local election, but if you segment that by age, then for under, say, 35, under 30, that would be a minuscule number of people. If you only have 30-odd% who are voting, and voting does tend to skew a bit older, then younger people are going to be very much, and younger people with a very different meaning to what that probably meant 30 years ago. Younger people in this case being maybe under 40, which is, for all certain people might complain about the young'uns not really, stepping forward in life. These are people with careers and families, and some of them will be renting, some of them will have a mortgage, but they'll certainly have their own fully fleshed out lives that they're trying to live. So one thing about Tom's campaign was, as I understand it, there was a little bit of an attempt to drive a bit of more voter turnout and see if there was a way to energise people to turn out. Doesn't seem to have fully panned out, but this is a first effort in a single ward, so it's not exactly a huge pool to determine whether that could be successful from. I am interested in your thoughts on the matter of turnout and the relationship that has with a minor party, as it were.
Definitely. Well, there's a couple of things to really note there, that we are we are now in a very volatile international political scenario. If you just look at every country in the world, every developed country, basically you could say it's in crisis, or, you just have to look at the UK, where the two major parties, Labour and the Tories, are in complete turmoil. You've got the Greens, you've got your party on the left, and on the other side you've got the Reform, Nigel Farage's Reform, which is leading in the polls and may well become the next government there. So that would have been unheard of. There's never been a time where that's happened in living memory. The Conservatives and the Labour Party in Britain have had a stranglehold on politics there since the 20s, and even then it was, the only other option was the Liberals. So I think that it's it's not the same as New Zealand, but it's indicative of what is happening out there, and they don't even have proportional representation. So that's a very unusual situation. America, the same thing. Obviously the Republican Party is an abnormal entity now. It is not, it's whatever it is. It's a very strange thing. And as you've noted, other parties all over the world which are kind of coming in. Even in Australia, it's a mess. So in New Zealand, I think I think you see it reflected in the popularity of the two main leaders, Luxon and Hipkins. There was very little they're resonating very poorly with the public. The only reason people kind of supporting them is it's a case of I want to support them because I don't like the other ones. That's where we're at now. There's a very negative kind of mood, I think, out there. I think younger people, and when you say younger, it could be right up to middle age, of course, now, I think they have grown up and exist in a atomised society with the economy is run along very market-based right-wing ideology, which means people are struggling with huge debt around housing especially, or high levels of rent if they don't own a house. And I think all those things are making creating a specific type of mood. But that mood has nowhere to go. And in some ways what we're seeing is I think that we're seeing the rise of very anti-rational politically illiterate kind of movements of, you could say, the conspiracy movement around that. This kind of like this new, very intolerant right-wing kind of movement, which has grown up. That's picking up all the support. Whereas the left is struggling, and it shouldn't be, because we're in conditions that really should be pushing people towards our message. So that's an interesting situation, and maybe it's just because the message hasn't been put in the right way, or it hasn't really been an option. So yeah, there's a whole lot of questions about that, the demographics, why people are supporting what they are at the moment. But I think that you see there is a disillusionment with politics. It's carrying on year after year with the lower turnouts and lower involvement and growing cynicism. But the trouble is the cynicism doesn't do anything. Actually, the people in charge really like cynicism because that helps keep things the same. And we've got to break that circuit. We've got to break that kind of loop that we're in. We're going to do our bit to kind of provide a bit of direction and a bit of hope for people, that things can be different. And but I think on that, the only thing I have to add to that, though, is it's very important that, as we were talking before about this terminal onlineness, obviously digital politics is here to stay. That's going to be a feature, and we're going to be into that. But since the 1980s or 1990s, there's been this big move. Everyone's tried different ways of organising. You have the Occupy movement. I think that you can't beat, and there's no way around, having an old-fashioned structure that's was around 100 years ago, of having a party, open party that people could be members of, that runs in elections, that also takes part in the wider political debate and in protests and in campaigns. It is not simply about elections. You have to be out there in the campaigning on, between elections as well, generating a culture around that. You've got to have that structure. It provides an institutional memory. It provides a sense of legacy. It provides a pathway forward. And I'm a big fan of structured organisation. I don't think you can do it by just having some kind of, Facebook group where people argue with each other. You've got to have a structured political party that exists, and that's what the Alliance is going to be, in my view.
Yeah, and this is something that I've thought quite a bit about. I've been very keen on this project, and for the listeners' sake, I have been somewhat involved, although not very, because, the only campaign has been Tom's campaign, and I'm here in Dunedin, not in Christchurch. But I have been thinking about this quite a bit, and I think I agree that if there's going to be a movement for significant and hopefully socialist change, that it's going to have some pretty old-fashioned formal structure to it. It's going to have to, and I think that's part of what has been missing is that sense of direction, is that sense of having a pole of attraction in politics for a certain kind of politics. For us, it's kind of democratic and socialist kind of direction we'd like to see things in. That's kind of the nature of this show, the nature of the organisation that supports it, and the nature of the party that we'll hopefully see grow in the near future. It doesn't necessarily mean, I'm glad you said that the Alliance will have kind of a part in that, because I don't think I don't think a single electoral vehicle, even if it's kind of the main electoral front of that side of things, will be the only piece of political infrastructure that's around. There will be other kinds of infrastructure that might weave in and out of that party and might be adjacent to it or supportive, but doing politics in a slightly different kind of way. But I think you are right that there is a need for an or some organisations that are formally structured. There's a very clear way to get involved. There's a very clear way for you to push the politics that you'd like to see in the world. And if those politics happen to be in the realm of kind of progressive, democratic, socialist change, then hopefully we can see some real natural homes for that emerge in New Zealand. And hopefully we'll see a party in which we can take some pride in the fact that Victor Billot was there and he helped get things off the ground again. So we're getting to the end of the show. We've got about 10 minutes left before I get into my reviews that will close things off. For people who are interested in that ground floor we mentioned earlier, you can kind of jump on the website and you can have a look at what's there at the moment, and if that interests you, it's possible to sign up. And if it doesn't interest you, there's people to flick an email to and send your queries and whatnot. For people who are wanting to be involved, in the nearish future, say over the summer and into next year, what would be something that they might expect to see and expect to do as things start to get on their feet again?
Okay, well, we've been fairly preoccupied with Tom's campaign. Now that's finished, we are moving on very quickly to providing those kind of events and structures for members, general members, who they're growing all the time. They're all over the country. So the first thing is we're going to be sending out some kind of newsletters to keep people informed about what's going on with the party. The second thing is for those people who interested in taking slightly more of an active role and getting involved, we will be having kind of preliminary meetings in the main centres are Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, hopefully Auckland, where we will be having get-togethers. And the idea of that is that they will form, at some point, formal branches, which is an important part of running a party where you can people can have input and work on a local level. So there are two of the kind of big things. At the moment where it's kind of like one of those, we're in a rapid takeoff phase. We're obviously not going to break 10,000 members by the end of the week, but feels like there's a lot of people coming in, and we're trying to our best to, in a timely way, create those structures for people to have a bit more input. And we will be having at some point a conference, and there will be ways that people can have an input into things, all sorts of things around our name, our brand, whether that's something they approve of, or whether we stand in general elections, and of course our policies. And so we will have opportunities down the track for people to get involved and have a say. But to get involved and have a say, you have to sign up. So if anyone's listening and goes, this is a good idea, I support this, and then just goes away and does nothing about it, well, if that happens, we'll fizzle. We need to have people, if there isn't any interest there, any support in these ideas, the only way we're going to achieve them is by people at least signing up and at least staying in touch and at least being part of the movement. That's the key. And if people don't do that, it won't happen. But I believe that there's enough people out there, the numbers are there for us to have a serious impact. And that just depends on, no one's got a crystal ball, but if we've got the people, I think we can make some changes, which I'd like to see.
And I think something for the wider socialist movement kind of writ large in New Zealand that I think more and more of the extant movement is thinking about is how to put socialism on the table as something of a serious politics again, something that even if the various political forces don't agree with it, don't want it, vehemently against it. They have to take it seriously because it's there and it's not going away. Perhaps we will see the Alliance be part of that project for socialism to be a serious political project that can't be ignored anymore in New Zealand. So we're going to go on to the reviews part of the show. After that, I will kind of give Victor a final word and we'll sign out. I'll give a little bit of an indication as to some socialist society events happening in the nearish future, or quite near future for one of them. And also just a little update on the show as well. So it is, as everyone will know, October. There is a particular kind of event that happens in October called Halloween. People who have been listening to the show throughout will, or perhaps some of my previous shows, or been involved in some events I've helped run, will know that I'm very keen on Halloween. And so there's a slight theme to the two reviews today. It does stick to the normal pattern. There is one piece of New Zealand media and one piece of kind of free slot media where I can pick as I please. And so the New Zealand media is a critically, I believe, underappreciated album by a now quite long since disbanded Palmerston North band called Wall of Silence. And I need to specify that it is silence with a T, not with a C. That's something that trips people up when they try and find this band. Perhaps not the best piece of naming there. But Wall of Silence and their 2008 album Looking Through Cadaver Eyes, which is a heavily inspired by horror culture, films, comic books, and music. It's pretty rough around the edges, very punk and garage influenced heavy metal album, with a lot of nods to various horror franchises and pieces of horror culture from over the years. Some of the songs are kind of direct references to one thing or another. There is, for example, a track on it, one of my favourite tracks on it, The Lament Configuration, which is a direct nod to Clive Barker's Hellraiser series. As well as a number of other tracks. You'll hear the classic for this type of music. There'll be clips from various horror movies interspersed with the music, and it's for a Halloween kind of time album. It's a good one to soundtrack your kind of spooky season to. Obviously, the spooky season looks different here to the Northern Hemisphere where it originated. But unfortunately, the 31st of October and Halloween is so clearly tied to the time of the year in which it is right to allow the creeps and ghouls to have their time, for us in the sun, for the other side of the world in the moonlight. But I very highly recommend this album. It is very good. If you like the kind of very rough around the edges, chaotic, very punk-influenced heavy metal, and if you happen to like that with a bit of a spooky flavour to it, I can't but recommend this album. The band famously, I think probably one of the most well-known things about the band was their self-description as the cigarette burn in the carpet of Palmerston North, which is a very memorable way of making your mark. The other album, and it is an album that I'm going to bring up, is another heavy metal album. As people might have noticed a little bit of a theme in what I recommend, at least when it comes to music, and that is the King Diamond 1987 critically acclaimed album Abigail. King Diamond, Danish musician, formerly fronted the critically acclaimed heavy metal band Merciful Fate in the 1980s, and briefly again in the 1990s. And very famously in his solo career has, for just about every single album he's released, put out a themed kind of horror concept album. Think of a more heavy metal inflected version of, say, Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare. He is also a professional storyteller, which I think is a very nice touch to things. Not a profession you hear very much in the modern day, but he does do kind of professionally outside of his music, do events where he'll sit down and read an old ghost story for an audience with the full makeup and accoutrement. And he also happens to be an incredibly good writer when it comes to the lyricism in crafting these concept albums. You get a kind of full-bodied story rather than just some vague themes when you listen to one of his albums, and Abigail, I believe deservingly, is by far and away his most critically acclaimed work in that field. King Diamond also someone that if you've heard of him at all, it would either be for his role in establishing the kind of link between horror culture and heavy metal in the late 1970s and early 1980s. If you've heard of him for anything else, it will be his astonishing vocal range, which goes from a relatively deep, I forget exactly how deep it goes, but it is reasonably low, all the way up to a high falsetto with some very impressive highs that he's able to pull off both in studio and live. And which are particularly haunting when combined and kind of overdubbed in a studio setting, creates this very ghostly wail. Not for everyone, but if it happens to be for you, and you have not listened to this album before, perhaps you've not listened to King Diamond, might be someone you've never heard of, might be someone you've heard of but never given a chance, very highly recommend, again, for the spooky season, his album Abigail, 1987. I believe it's been re-released a few times. It's not the hardest thing in the world to get your hands on if you like having a physical copy of things, and a fairly easy album to find online. Physical copy of the other album, probably pretty difficult at this point, given the band's been discontinued for over a decade. But you can find on Bandcamp the other one. Again, that is Wall of Silence, Looking Through Cadaver Eyes from 2008. So, with the end of the show coming up, there are a couple events. I would like to, one event in particular actually, I'd like to spruik, and that is a in-conversation style, not quite lecture, but kind of two people having a chat to a live audience event that is the October Halloween event for the Otago Socialist Society for this year. I will be in conversation with Dr. Rosie Overall from the MIFCO department at the University of Otago. And we'll be having a discussion about heavy metal as a subculture and its particular appeal to and relationship with kind of working class and socially alienated people, and how it's kind of become a very enduring part of the lives of a lot of people who feel socially alienated, culturally oppressed, or quite simply living rather droll working class lives. Some kind of excitement in that realm. Rosie Overall, Dr. Rosie Overall, has written on this topic extensively, as well as a number of other topics in the media world, as well as Lacanian psychoanalysis, which is her main kind of philosophical field. And it should prove to be a very interesting conversation from two mega fans of the genre in question, but also kind of an intellectually stimulating one if you happen to be interested in how these things relate to subcultures. Or if you just happen to be a music fan and you'd like to hear a couple of music superfans ramble about a genre we love. Yes, if that sounds interesting to you, then please do come along. That will be at Yours Cafe, 43 Moray Place, and that will be on the 29th, which is next Wednesday, I believe, at 6:30 p.m. As is usual with that particular venue, there will be hot beverages and some food provided as well. So please do come along if that interests you, and do consider coming along to future events as well. We will also be having, and unfortunately I don't have the date written down, but towards the end of November, the Otago Socialist Society will also be having one of our social drinks, probably in the last week or so. So please do keep an eye out. Either sign up to our mailing list, which you can find at the New Zealand Federation of Socialist Societies website, or have a look on Facebook or Instagram, which are the two places that we have accounts online to advertise these events. And yes, it'll be towards the end of November, so just keep an eye out for when we make an announcement for the final details for that. Besides that, the Otago Socialist Society will be having its AGM in December, so if you happen to be interested in what we do, and you'd like to have a say in the direction of what we do in the future, maybe you've come along to a few of our events but you haven't quite pushed the button on joining, then consider joining, and you'll have full voting rights at AGM, at our annual general meeting, and you can have a little bit of a say, or at least put your piece forward as to where this organisation heads in the future. So, with all that being said, I'd like to hand a final word over to Victor. We've got a few minutes left, and I'll kind of make this a free space if you'd like to make your pitch in whatever way you see fit. And we'll have one little update on the show after that before we sign out. So I'm going to throw this one over to you, Victor.
Okay, well, I don't know if I can offer anything quite as exciting as nightmarish heavy metal, although that does sound like a very interesting event, and I know both the presenters, or the speaker and the presenter, are very versed in their topic, so I think that would be a good one to get along to. In terms of the Alliance, I mean, we cover all fields from easy listening to heavier sounds. But, what I can say is really I'm on a little bit of a mission at the moment to promote the party, what we're doing, along with some of our other leaders, emerging leaders and so forth. I've spoken in Christchurch at a launch for Tom. I've spoken recently in Wellington with Tom Roud, our Canterbury candidate, Christchurch candidate. And it's been interesting to get the response, and also had quite a few emails from people who are interested in what we're doing. So all I guess I could say is that if you're concerned about the direction our society's going, if you don't think the current parties, establishment parties, are kind of offering what you want, if you are interested or are interested in or are a socialist or democratic socialist, then I think we're the place for you. And really what it means is that we're going to be pushing really hard on things like changing the distribution of wealth in our society, which means helping less well-off people, because we believe that is something that's core to our mission, and we want a more equal society and a more well-off society in all ways, not just economically, socially as well. So that means taking the pressure off. And there's a lot of people out there doing it really hard at the moment, struggling, and they can't see a future. And it's very sad in a place like New Zealand, which is a developed country with amazing natural resources and a lot of potential, that we seem to be heading in a direction where there is a future, but only if you're a multi-millionaire. And everyone else is regarded as making up the numbers, the arms and legs. You should be grateful for what you've got, and if you don't like that, well, go off to Australia. And that's pretty much the message we're getting from the government at the moment. On that note, I'd like to say everyone, if this gets out in time, we'll be supporting the public sector strikes on the 23rd of October. We'll be supporting the Rā Whakamana protests on the 28th of October. And we urge all New Zealanders to get in behind our public sector and indeed all workers and support them in their cause, because that cuts to the heart of what the Alliance is about. It's about, rather than being a charity case or rather than just being ignored, it's about time that working class people took control of their destiny and said, we're better than this, we make the wealth, we run society, and we're not going to be told just to sit there and accept third-rate conditions and wages anymore. So that's, I guess, my end of my inspirational speech there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tyler.
No problem.
And thank you, listeners.
So in the final minute or two here, just a quick update on the show. This is the penultimate episode of it. I will be signing off, at least for this show, almost certainly not for radio generally, perhaps not even for Otago Access Radio, but for the life of Left From Nowhere, I will be signing off for the last time at our next episode, which will be later in November, and I'm hoping to put together something a little grander in scale for that, but the plans are still very embryonic at the moment. We figure out exactly how we're going to go about the ideas that I've had. If you are a fan of the show, if you've been listening for a while, please do tune in to the next episode, because I'm hoping to do something a little bit special with it. And a big thank you to the coterie of listeners who have built up over time. Some of you have reached out to me via the Otago Socialist Society kind of socials, and I'm very grateful for people that have. So this show, not quite winding down yet, but will be at the next episode. But please do keep an eye out for that. And if you enjoyed the show and you would like to see something like this in the future, one easy way to do it is to join the Otago Socialist Society. I don't usually make the pitch. I like to focus on the very interesting guests that I bring in to have a chat about various things, but I'm going to make the pitch now because I don't have much more time left to make it. If you have really enjoyed the show and you think that what the show has covered has been valuable, useful, or even just interesting, consider joining the Otago Socialist Society, or even just coming along to some of our events to see what we're about, because the spirit of the show is very much the spirit of the society as well. So with that, I would like very much to thank Victor Billot for coming in, President of the Alliance, one of many hats he wears, and sign out for the second to last time. This is Left From Nowhere. I'm your host, Tyler West. This is a show sponsored, again, by the Otago Socialist Society, and you are, of course, listening to it via Otago Access Radio 105.4 FM, 1575 AM.
The weight sucks stronger by the year. The weight sucks stronger by the year. The weight sucks stronger by the year. The answer's never clear. You walk upon the sphere. Keep walking.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.